And this is going to sound a little repetitive after the last 3 meetings, but there's a script I need to go through. So I'm going to ask everyone's patience while we go through this. So to conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate the emergency procedures authorized by the Freedom of Information Act and the Emergency Ordinance, the Lee District SSPA Task Force needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record. First, because each member of the task force is participating in this meeting from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members is participating and that each member's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate volume for all of the other members to hear. Accordingly, I'm going to conduct a roll call and ask each task force member to state your name and the location from which you are participating. If you're home, you can just say that you're at home. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can each hear each of your colleagues. Following this roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear the other member. So at this point, I'm going to pass the virtual gavel to our Vice Chair, Tom Sachs. Hello, Tom. You're out there somewhere.
Yes.
And I'm going to do that so that I can be heard to make the requisite motions.
Do we have any motions?
Yes, Tom, we do. So first motion is I move that every member's, well, you know what? I skipped over the roll call. I'm so sorry. Before we need to do the roll call. So here we go. So as I state your name, please speak up, state your name, repeat your name and where you are. So first, Robert Livingstone.
Robert Livingstone, home.
Thank you. Carol Allum.
Carol Allum is at home.
Thank you. Rand Pixa.
Rand Pixa at home.
Thank you. And your alternate, Andy Bernick.
Andy Bernick at home.
Great, thanks. Pamela Peñeros. Pamela Peñeros. And alternate, Leslie Hatch.
Present. And I'm at home.
That's Leslie. Thank you.
No, this is Pamela.
Oh, this is Pamela. Okay, very good. Thank you. Leah Lambus Skidmore.
This is Leah Lambus Skidmore at home.
Thank you. Larry Dempsey.
Larry Dempsey is at home.
Very good. Jane Kelly.
Jane Kelly at home.
Thank you. John Schaefer. John Schaefer. Moving on. Jeff Safel.
Yes, Jeff Safel is here, so is Sona. At home.
Welcome to you both. Tom Rickert.
Tom Rickards here, at home.
Thank you. Cindy Potter.
Cindy Potter here at home.
Welcome, Cindy. And then your alternate, Jay Dick. Is Jay with us?
Jay is participating in the audience, not as an alternate tonight.
Okay, thank you. Jim Drinkard. Jim Drinkard. Moving on. Rosemary Clee.
Rosemary Clay at home.
Clay, I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
And your alternate, Liz Murphy. Moving on, Holly Doherty. Holly, are you there?
Hi, Ed. Yes, I'm here. I'm at home.
Thank you. Don Tennant,
Don Tennant, I'm at home.
thank you. Carl Sell. Carl?
Hello,
Hello. Carl, state your name, please.
Carl Sell at home.
Thank you. Mariah Jones.
Mariah Jones at home.
Thank you. Marta Morrissey.
Martha Morrissey here at home.
Thank you. Steve Levinson. Steve Levinson. Are you with us, Steve? Moving on. Tom Sachs.
Tom Sachs at home.
Thank you. Jim McCracken.
Jim McCracken at home.
Thank you. And your alternate, Juliana Sharp.
Not present.
And your other alternate, Rachel Dexter.
Not present.
Very good. Thank you. John Tomko. John Tomko. Moving on. Richard Dresner. Richard Dresner.
Rich Dresner at home.
Thank you. And John Gagnon.
John again at home.
Thank you. Okay. We have completed the roll call. That each member's voice may be adequately heard by each other member of the Lee District Task Force.
Are there any motions from the floor?
Yeah, I move that each member's voice may be adequately heard by each other member of the task force.
All in favor?
I second.
All in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
A little bit. Are there any other motions from the floor?
Yes, okay. Next, we must establish the nature of the emergency that compels these emergency procedures. The fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how we have arranged for public access to this meeting. Therefore, I move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for the task force to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting, and that as such, the Freedom of Information Act's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly of the task force and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that the task force may conduct this meeting electronically through a dedicated video and audio conferencing line, and that the public may access this meeting by registering through the meeting link on the track and nomination page of the SSPA website at https://www.fairfaxcounty.gov/plan-amendments/SSPA/SSPA/track-nomination, or by calling 1-408-418-9388 TTY 711 and entering the access code 129-318-0494. It is so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there a second?
This is John again, and I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Any other motions from the floor?
All right. Yes. Finally, it is next required that all the matters addressed on today's agenda be limited to those that address the emergency itself, are necessary for continuity in Fairfax County government, and/or are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations and the discharge of the Lee District SSPA task force's lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. I therefore move that this meeting must be conducted online during the current emergency in order to discharge the lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities of the Lee District SSPA task force.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, there is a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion is carried.
Point, I will take back the virtual gavel from Vice Chair Tom. Thank you so much. The full rules for the task force meetings are laid out in a document called Responsibilities and Meeting Procedures, which is available to the public on the SSPA Track and Nomination website, and which was sent to all task force members. The job of this task force is to do an initial screening of the nominations, to recommend to the Planning Commission whether or not each nomination should receive further detailed study by being included in the Comprehensive Plan Amendment Work Program. The vote of the task force, whether or not to recommend inclusion in the work program for each nomination, will be documented on a task force report form. The task force reports will be submitted by our secretary, Leah Lambus Skidmore. Keep in mind, no ultimate decisions are made by this task force. We are just part of a long process. Tonight, we are considering only one nomination for the Hilltop Village Shopping Center. We began our consideration of this nomination on August 10th, but postponed taking any action to give members of the task force time to read all of the written public comments which were received. We will continue our consideration of this nomination tonight as follows. First, we'll give the nominator about 10 minutes to update her arguments in favor of the nomination. Then we'll follow that with a period of about 30 minutes for comments or questions from the public, keeping in mind that we want to keep our comments as short as possible with a maximum of 2 minutes per speaker. And then we'll move on to discussion from the task force and eventually a vote. These time limits may be adjusted as seems necessary to fairly and efficiently conduct the meeting. At the conclusion of the task force discussion, I will call for a motion. Any member can move that the nomination be, 1, included in the Comprehensive Plan Amendment Work Program, meaning it would receive further detailed study, or 2, that it be excluded from the work program, meaning it would not receive further study, or 3, that it be included in the work program, but with specific recommendations from the task force. After the motion is seconded, we will vote by roll call, answering yes or no rather than yay or nay, because those words sound less like each other. Please remember, all we are doing here is deciding whether or not to recommend that the nomination receive further study. No ultimate decision is being made. Everyone should mute themselves except when they are recognized to speak. If you wish to speak, raise your hand and then lower it when you are done speaking. All members should be ready to vote when called upon. And again, votes will be cast by saying yes or no, because it's more easily distinguished. Those words are more easily distinguished from each other. Please note that we've received greater than 100 written comments from the community as to this nomination before our August 10th meeting, and we've received an additional few written comments since then. All of these comments have been distributed to members of the task force for their consideration, and there is no need to repeat here what was said in writing. And with that, we're done the script, and we're ready to move on to Lynn Strobel, who's here as the nominator. I know you're out there, Lynn. Welcome, and take it away.
Thank you very much. Again, Lynn Strobel, representing the nominator, and I do have a brief presentation, and I wondered if Graham could load that for me, please, and help with turning the pages. And before we begin, while he's loading that, I would say that I really appreciated the discussion that Mr. Waller had prior to the meeting commencing, and just clarifying that, we have filed a nomination seeking to be placed on the county's work program. So, it's just the first step of many. And a lot of the concerns that we've heard will be addressed either by staff as part of the comprehensive plan amendment process or in a future land use application. So as he was loading that presentation, I just wanted to emphasize that this is just to allow further discussion in the work program. So I'm here tonight on behalf of JLB Realty, and we can go to the first slide. There was some discussion in the last presentation clarifying what is approved on the site and what is proposed as a part of the nomination process. This property, as we've mentioned before, Hilltop Village Center, is zoned PDC, Planned Development Commercial. It is subject to a proffered conceptual final development plan. And this is the plan. And in the bottom left corner, right at the intersection of Telegraph and Beulah, an office building is approved, as well as a garage. That office building was approved for a height of 55 feet, 4 stories, 96,000 square feet of gross floor area. The parking structure, 40 feet, 4 levels, 500 parking spaces. So that is what is shown on the approved proffered development plan. And I just want to clarify that it was intended that that parking garage would provide parking for that office building and perhaps some retail parking spaces. And if we go to the next slide, what we have proposed is a concept, and this is just a concept. This is not the footprint of the building of what it would look like. It is one way that it could be built. What we are proposing is a residential building of 57 feet or 2 feet taller, 1 story higher, about 275,450 square feet of gross floor area, and 275 units. The parking structure is in the same location, but its footprint is smaller. It is 10 feet taller, 1 level higher. And you might ask, well, why is that if the footprint is smaller? Because the circulation was not well thought out. It's a smaller footprint, so it got a little bit taller. It's intended to serve the residential building plus 100 parking spaces. And I want to be very clear about this so there's no accusation of falsehood. There are surface parking spaces now in the area of the garage and in the footprint of the office building. There are 121, we went out and counted, talked to the owner, 121 surface parking spaces in the area of the footprint of the garage and 100 parking spaces in the area of the office building that was there. So that exists today, but that is not on the approved development plan. So that is not approved parking. It is an interim parking situation. What is approved is the office building, a parking structure of 500 spaces. We are proposing a parking structure of 580 spaces to serve the residential plus 100 retail spaces. So I think the question is, are we reducing the number of retail spaces? Well, no, we're not, because those spaces are just interim parking spaces in the footprint of where the garage will be. On the approved plan, the proffered plan, it shows a parking garage of 500 parking spaces. We are providing a parking garage of 580 parking spaces. I would note that the requirement as a part of this discussion with the owner is that the 100 parking spaces in the area of the approved office building will remain while the parking garage is built first. It will have 100 retail spaces, and then the residential building will be built. So I just wanted to be very clear about parking, what exists today, but what is approved. So let's go to the next slide, please. So this is the residential building in the context of the existing center. Again, a concept. Is it a different footprint? It absolutely is. There was an office building there, which was simply a rectangle. Residential building is different. It has more articulation. It has courtyards because it's a residential building. Again, it's a concept of what could be there. I also want to clarify Fort Belvoir's position, and I'm happy to provide the name of the person I spoke to and his title. I spoke with Chris Landgraf on more than one occasion. He is the acting director of Public Works. He was designated as the individual to speak to, and he did not approve this development. And I want to make this clear. He said he did not object because the parking garage, and we did adjust it based on his comments, but we put the parking garage in the same location as it was with the office building. And for that reason, he said that he, on behalf of Fort Belvoir, did not object. So I just want to clarify that. The next slide, please. So we did some sections to show a comparison of the two building footprints. We have three sections, section A, B, and C, taken at the exact same locations. And this shows existing improvements. And then on the left-hand side, the approved office plan and the proposed multifamily concept. And if we go to the next slide, we can see what those sections look like. So that first section is from Beulah through the building. So you see the office versus the residential. Residential buildings broken up. Remember, we have courtyards, things like that. The next section is Telegraph Road through the residential and or office building, again, showing the courtyard. And then at the bottom is the section from Telegraph through the garage. So the garage is taller. I think it's clear it's another level. But we also think that one way between the existing retail office building and the parking garage doesn't make sense. That's why we're proposing two-way traffic, and that's what is shown on this section. So I just wanted to be clear about that. And then the next slide, please. So with the trip generation, and want to clarify that when we went through the rezoning, there was a traffic study that was done. Doug Kennedy was our traffic consultant. I believe he is on the line with us. And he did do a thorough traffic study. And there were a series of transportation proffers that were agreed to. It was not envisioned that this corner would be vacant. It is the site of a 96,000 square foot office building. And that was taken into account. And there were proffers that were approved. There were proffers for monetary contributions, traffic signals, road improvements, road dedications. So it was a thorough transportation proffer package. So the proposal is for residential, and there are different impacts. Now, Doug Kennedy has not done a full traffic study yet, but he did look at certain elements of this for comparative purposes. One of the things he looked at was peak hour trip generation comparatively between office use and residential use. And what this shows and what he determined is that during the peak hour, when the most traffic is on the road, that there would be fewer peak hour trips as generated by the residential development. We go to the next slide. And this, he also took a look at each of the intersections from the shopping center to the road network. And he took a look at peak hours, AM peaks, PM peaks, And it's a little difficult to see, but orange is the office and blue is the residential. And so what you can see in that chart is that there is the residential, it does have a greater number of daily trips, but during the peaks, it is less at most of those intersections. So, and again, this is something that there would be a full traffic study. Should we get into the nomination process? Should we file a proper condition amendment? So these were just, it was an opportunity for Doug to take a look at this just globally without doing a full study, but with coming up with data based on the prior study and looking at modifying 96,000 square feet of office to the proposed residential. If we go to the next slide, there were a number of issues that were identified by the community. I'll just go through them very briefly. Increased traffic, we've talked about that. We think that there will be less peak hour demand. We will look at traffic thoroughly when we go through our process and look at proffers. Those proffers could include improvements on-site, off-site. It could include contributions, TDMs, but that would absolutely be studied as part of not only the comprehensive plan amendment process, but more specifically during a proper condition amendment. School
Lynn, if you could, I'm sorry to interrupt, if you could just define TDMs.
Transportation demand management. And that is a traffic term that there are looking at ways to reduce the number of single occupancy vehicles, doing things like ensuring that, you know, there is information available to residents of the building about mass transit, about the buses that come by this site. So it would be opportunities to look at all of that when we came through a process. On the school impact, you know, there's a formula that has been developed by Fairfax County Public Schools that would be applied here should we go through a proper condition amendment. I would say that the developer anticipates that this building will be primarily studios and one bedrooms. He does not anticipate that, you know, there will be a lot of 2 bedrooms, family units, things like that. Agreeing to a certain percentage of, say, studios can be proffered. So those are the types of things that would be, you know, looked at and worked on should we go through a process. Increase in FAR and compatibility with the community. Yes. Are we increasing FAR? Yes. There's an increase proposed of square footage, but we also believe that this adds synergy between residential and the shopping center. Residents could walk to the grocery store. They could walk to restaurants. It's part of what I think people are increasingly looking at as mixed use development, things like the mosaic, where you are putting people near services and amenities. You need people to ensure that a shopping center is vibrant and continues to attract quality tenants, especially important as retail continues to evaluate under today's circumstances and in the future. Regarding parking, there were 1,362 required parking spaces with the rezoning. What was provided was 1,855 parking spaces. That's on the proffered plan. So this center is overparked. There is more parking than would be required. Some of that is due to Wegmans, but there is plenty of parking on this site. And as I mentioned, we are going to make sure that we have 100 retail parking spaces in the garage, that garage as shown on the approved development plan. Open space is going to be important to a residential building. The developer is going to make sure that he has amenities for his residents. So that will be provided on site. There's also open space in the shopping center. There was a 20% proffer requirement. I'm not sure that all of that open space is as good as it could be, having been down there. So that is something that we will evaluate and possibly improve as a part of going through a process. And then lastly, I think we talked briefly about this. There are ball fields that are coming up the road, just on top of what formerly was landfill property. So that's coming soon. So next, just briefly, some of the outreach that we did since the last, and this goes to the next slide, some outreach since the last task force presentation. And the slide's not coming up, but that's okay. We contacted Lansdowne, Island Creek, Hawthorne Estates, Raceway Farms, Crest of Alexandria, Fairfax County staff. We tried to reach out to people. We did meet with the boards of Lansdowne and Island Creek. I appreciate that Lansdowne and Island Creek are in opposition to this and have made that clear. I think that what was good about our discussions with Raceway Farms and Crest of Alexandria especially is that I think they now understand that this is the first step in a multi-step process. This is not a discussion about whether a residential building should be approved here. It's a discussion about whether there should be further study of that. And we didn't hear that same opposition. Now that could be just the people that we were talking to. I don't know. Raceway Farms would like for us to have a larger community meeting with them. Happy to do that. We told the Crest of Alexandria that we'll continue to keep them abreast of where we are in this process should this go forward. So we have tried to do some outreach. We did also have another discussion with Fairfax County staff because, you know, they recommended that this be included in the work program, and we wanted to discuss, you know, some of the opposition that we heard for this. And I will say, and staff is on the phone with us, but they still support this proposal. They do think, I think like we do, that this is an opportunity for some housing in an area where it might be very appropriate. It might be able to serve Fort Belvoir. We look at this as studios and one bedrooms, probably affordable to some folks, and also creating, as I said, that synergy with the shopping center and making the shopping center stronger through that. So I will stop now. I apologize. I hope that that was within my time frame, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Lynn. Before we move on, I just want to make note that Jim Drinkard is with us. He didn't answer up during the roll call. You there? Jim Drinkard, are you with us?
Yes, yes, I'm here from Springfield.
Okay, thank you, Jim. So I will mark you as present and eligible to vote. Okay, with that, let's move on to public comment. Graham, I'm depending on you to tell me who heard.
Sure, thank you, Ed. So members of the public, there are a couple of ways that you can participate in this section. If you are in the WebEx interface doing the video and audio conferencing, what you'll want to do is raise your hand, and I can show you how to do that. So there's a couple of buttons that are in the main interface. One of them is called the participants button. So you'll want to click on that. It looks like a person with 3 horizontal lines next to it. That'll bring up the list of participants, and at the bottom of that panel, you'll see a small hand. And so you just want to raise that hand exactly by pushing that button. So I'm seeing a couple of folks that are starting to do that. If you're calling in by phone, you can also raise your hand by your phone. The way you do that is by entering *3 on your dial pad, and that'll do the exact same thing, raising your hand in the system, so we'll know to unmute you. So we have a couple of speakers. As we go through the public comment period, if there's additional people that want to speak, please just raise your hand and we'll know to call on you. All right, so the first is Emmanuel Dash. Emmanuel, I've unmuted you. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Okay. I want to thank the task force again for letting me speak. I spoke last time as well. I'm a member of the Lansdowne community, also a member of the board of directors, and I've been the one tasked by the board, in addition to the president, Jay Dick, who I believe is also on the call, to kind of aggregate our concerns to this development, to include the petition, which I believe as of now is over 1,400 signatures large, the letter writing campaign, which I believe you've seen some, although I'm not sure you've seen all, and then additionally people joining this call right now, and I think there are several other residents, even though I can't see the participant list. So I just wanted to say real quick, going point to point to the representative of the developer, I don't know how conducive that is, but I really want to emphasize one thing that seems to be the most pertinent to me. So there's this talk about installing a residential facility within an environment that doesn't really have anything that looks like it within this kind of this footprint that's more commercial. And the notion of somehow that this will integrate or raise the profile of that environment, facilitate commerce, et cetera, et cetera. For anyone who's driven past here or gone to that Wegmans, et cetera, this is very much a vehicle-based environment. This is townhomes and single families in that entire area, and then everyone drives in and out all the time. Sticking 300 units worth of people on a corner of a block and expecting that not to have both, you know, besides the fact of the impact from the aesthetics, which I'm not even dealing with, but just the impact on the environment with 300 units worth of vehicles and people walking to and from, kids playing outside. You know, they have a courtyard, I understand that, but that's like a prison courtyard. The reality is where people are going to spill out into is going to be the Green Turtle pub right across the street, which there's a single lane that bases, you know, one lane each way separating this planned development and a bar. This is not a place where people can roam. And I appreciate the promised future developments and amenities. And when we spoke to the representative during our board meeting, there was this, you know, oh, this is coming, and oh, we plan this, and oh, we hope that one day there'll be this piece. And I appreciate that. But I'll be honest, this sounds like just an opportunity for the developer to get you all to recommend this to the next level, and then they'll fight the next phase at that point. So I'm here again as a representative of now about almost 1,500 people, at least on the petition, saying they are vehemently opposed to this development for a host of reasons, some of which have been expressed, and really urge you to not pass this past your point at this point because of all those concerns. So that's it. I appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lynn, you have a response?
I guess my only response is that I do think that this can be designed to be integrated within, you know, the shopping center. I mean, that's what mixed use centers do. And I do think that, you know, this is about getting to the next level, but that next level is going to have a lot of staff participation, a lot of community participation, and that's when we can agree to certain things. As I mentioned, you know, things like a percentage of studios, 1-bedrooms. We can talk about more amenities specifically. We can have Doug look more closely at traffic issues. So it's not about getting to a next level to decline to do things. It's about getting to the next level so we can get into the details of what can be done here. And I will say that this is not going to be a vacant parcel. It's too expensive for that. Land is too expensive. Something will be built here. We do think this is better than the office building, and we think it would, again, kind of complement the shopping center. So that's all I'll say. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Lynn. Who do we have next?
Oh, before that, Ed, I just wanted to mention that Steve Levinson has joined us. I don't think that he was in the initial roll call. But we
I think you're correct about that. Steve,
Sorry about that. Some technical issues. I'm on now. I've been on for about 5-10 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Okay. Who do we have next?
Next is Jay Dick. Jay, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes,
Thank you. Thank you, Ed, Graham Task Force. I really appreciate again the opportunity to address you again. My name is Jay Dick. I have the pleasure of serving as the president of the Lansdowne Community Association. And so it is obvious that Ms. Strobel has read my latest public comments. I'm glad that she could use those comments for her bullet points so she could clarify a lot of her statements to you that were not quite the same as her last time that she spoke to you. I speak today not simply to restate my opposition, but to add additional information that, again, we've learned through this last meetings of the SSPA or when she met with the Lansdowne Board of Directors. From the diagrams that I shared, that were shared at the SSPA meeting, and also in my comments, I had some photos in my secondary comments to give you a little bit better idea on the ground of what you're driving through You know, I really have concerns. You know, that building now wraps around the corner of Telegraph and Beulah instead of just being parallel to Beulah as that office building would be. And while I think there was a comment it's only going to be 15 feet higher, well, the footprint of that building is now massive. It goes around the corner, it's up on a hill, and it would just dominate that corner intersection and detract from the community. While Ms. Strobel at the last SSPA meeting and at this meeting continues to say there will be no net loss of parking, again, I have to say that that is not necessarily a factual statement. There are 124 spots in the area where the parking lot would be built. She's only now going to have 100, so that's a net loss of 24. And then that's just ignoring the 121. I thought there was 124 when I went and physically counted those spaces that are in use today that are going to be lost. She states that these were just interim spaces, but they're already being used. She also states that there's plenty of spaces at this at the complex. Well, those spaces are on the far end of where Wegmans is, and so if you are a business person along that drive there's already been a dry cleaner that's went out of business because there's not enough parking close to them. And so I really worry about that, in addition to how are you going to keep the residents from parking in that first level? And so you're going to see a lot more problems with, I think, parking going on with that. Trying to go through quickly because I was trying to do notes to respond here. One thing that we haven't talked about is the pedestrian traffic. Emmanuel, my co-board member at Lansdowne, just mentioned this. If you're wanting people to cross Beulah to go over to CVS or the other areas over there, that's not a very pedestrian friendly area. So I warn you about having those problems over there. I'm glad that Ms. Strobel could clarify that Fort Belvoir does not object. I think that was not the language used that last time, so I'm glad that there's more careful language now, so you know that there's a difference between approve and just does not object. And then lastly, Ms. Strobel she's very good at what she does. So I give Lynn props for what she's doing here. And unfortunately, we're on opposite sides of this time where we weren't on last time. You know, there's always times for future changes for things. As Emmanuel just said, we don't have a lot of confidence in future changes. I'd rather put a stop to this now and come back with something that's more, I guess, realistic. If you're going to have changes, why didn't we not just start with some of these things at the beginning? You know, I'm finishing up here. She made some comments about, the Mosaic district over there. We are not the Mosaic district. That is two separate areas from us. We are a residential area. And, we do not have the high rises, we don't have, all those things right here. So to compare us to the Mosaic, I think is ill-informed. She has her concerns about stuff that, again, can be, done at a later later time. Increased traffic, school impact, compatibility, parking concerns, open spaces. That's a long list to be able to address at a later date. So I just really am concerned about this. Again, I register our opposition, and I do believe that this is some of the largest number of oppositions that the SSPA has received, and I ask you to be aware and respect that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jay. Lynn?
I really don't have much to say. I think that it's not correct to say that the 100 parking spaces where the office building is and the 121 or 124 where the garage is, those are not approved parking spaces. They were put there and as an interim basis, so they're not required in that location, and we are going to meet all the requirements. And I just keep thinking that we're putting the cart before the horse, kind of given the fact that, to resolve issues like school impact before we even have residential as part of the plan, it's just putting the cart before the horse in the way of all of the details that we always negotiate when we go through a process. So I'll just leave it at that.
Lynn, when you say go through a process, maybe for the members of the public, you could
Sure.
take a
Happy
moment to explain what that process is.
Correct. So if this is accepted as part of the work program, just to analyze the comprehensive plan, that's going to be step 2. And that's going to be a process that will include staff and the community and the nominator looking at appropriate language, perhaps to be inserted into the comprehensive plan that would be general guidance for if residential is placed here, what would be the conditions of that? What would be the parameters? After that, if that is adopted into the plan, we would have to go to step 3, which is, again, input from the community, from staff, working with an applicant as part of a proper condition amendment. And that would be very similar, it's the same process as when you go through a rezoning. And we would negotiate everything from what that building's going to look like, where it is, what shape it is, how tall it is, you know, everything with regard to proffers, transportation, you know, just everything imaginable. And that again would be negotiated with the community, with staff, the applicant at that point. And there would be public hearings in both steps, all the steps in this process, but there would be public hearings before the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. So, you know, a lot of steps left.
Okay, thank you. All right, who do we have next?
Next is Whitney Miller. Whitney, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
No, stop. Sorry about that.
Go ahead, Whitney, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. So I just wanted to say respectfully to Lynn, I think it's dishonest to claim that no parking is being taken away. You claim that parking is not being taken away by comparing the old plan to the new plan rather than the actual number of spaces that are available for use and by use. The original plan for an office building with a parking garage would presumably have offered more potential parking for that building and existing retail, which the other folks who have spoken have already talked about the difficulty in parking in that area as it is. Instead, putting a residential building in that space would dedicate the majority of those spaces to the residential building. Moreover, it could reasonably be expected that some portion of the extra parking spaces remaining would be consumed by visitors of that residential building or residents who have more than one car, which we see a lot of in this area. This would in effect actually eliminate parking for the existing retail, which again is already difficult. My child is in after school care over there, and in non-COVID times when I go to pick my child up in the evening, I've got to park as far away as a football field to get over to that parking space, or to get over to the space where my child is. So I just don't see how adding, you know, this residential would improve that. I think it, again, would take away. I also highly doubt the proposal that claims that the residents of this community are going to access mass transit, such as Metro, using the existing bus system. That simply is not the norm in this area. When you drive around and you see buses, they're nearly always empty, even in non-COVID times. This is quite simply a car-based area, and I would expect the residential unit, residents of this unit would follow suit. So that's 300 plus more cars on the road every day, and the traffic coming out on Beulah off of Fort Belvoir each evening is already backed up all the way down the street. So again, I think this would just make that problem worse. And lastly, like the other folks who have spoken, I greatly worry about any increased pedestrian traffic in this area. There's already been at least one pedestrian who was killed, and there's a memorial up to that individual. And I know that happens in other places, but I think that just is a higher risk that comes with this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Lynn, just feel free, if I'm not going to call on you each time, if there's something you want to say, just feel free to jump in to respond. But
just one brief thing, I don't know how else to explain this, but on the approved development plan, there's a garage and an office building. This kind of goes in the category of no good deed goes unpunished. There were interim parking spaces there that are not shown on the approved plan, and we are going to be providing 100 retail spaces. And then pedestrian traffic, that's the type of issue that we could look at and analyze and address as part of this process. So we would look forward to that opportunity.
And just for everybody's benefit, I mean, what, I mean, I hear a lot of the community focused on losing the spaces that are currently on site. And what Lynn is talking about is those that are in the approved plan. I think that's, those are two different things. I think at least on that, you may wish to compare to one rather than the other, but I don't think there's any need to keep beating that to death. I think that's completely clear at this point what that difference is. So who do we have next?
Next is Matt Zramoski. Matt, can you hear us?
Thank you. I can. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Thank you for the opportunity for the task force to speak. One thing to start off with, I do think we understand the process. I've served on the Mount Vernon task force several years ago, and I know in speaking to several of my local homeowner associations, they do understand the process. And we think rather than bringing this area to the next level, we actually think this would lower the quality of our life and lower the level of living around here. My association, Newington, opposed the shopping center originally. Our president led that effort. The reason I and about 4-5% of the community was against it was not because of the Wegmans of the stores, but it was because of the office building. We thought it was too dense and too high for the area. So we're being consistent. We now, and at that time, we were rejected when we requested that that building be lowered or eliminated, or even moved to the back corner away from Telegraph Road. So I think the primary concern from everybody is the parking is a partial concern, as you've heard tonight. I think the real concern for Island Creek, Lansdowne, my neighborhood, Raceway Farms, is we feel a building of this size is totally out of character with a community that is composed of single family homes and townhouses and sets a terrible precedent. So we respectfully are requesting a task force not include this in the program workbook. I am pro-business, as many of my community are. And as a matter of fact, I spoke to one of the business owners in the shopping center who is not in favor of this, but was afraid to speak up tonight because he said he's been pressured by people in the shopping center and the land. So interestingly, this is the first time I've lived in this community now for over 20 years. We have 15 homes in our neighborhood that have the third generation of the same family living there. Now they bought it, and I don't mean multiple generations living there, but people have stayed here because they love this community. And this is the first time in those 20 years that I have not met one person in the community that supports this development. So we are respectfully requesting a task force. We do understand what step this is in the process, and we are requesting you to not put it in the workbook. And we do certainly understand the process, and we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. So who do we have next?
Next is, excuse me, next is Michael Vigiano. Michael, can you hear us? Michael Vigiano, can you hear us? Michael, can you hear us?
Hello? Yes.
Hello, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you for your time. And just after listening to this briefing, I believe I'm a resident of the Lansdowne area, been here for 2 years. And in my view, the area does not need more people living here. While commercial property would provide more jobs, that would be great versus more people living in the area. I don't think that would be beneficial. Residents already walk to the shopping center from our area and the Island Creek area. I believe the shopping center is a vibrant area. Businesses seem to be, at least pre-COVID, steadily with customers. Traffic in the area is already pretty bad. We have 2 children, so walking across Blua is very, very dangerous with them. So we have to keep a close eye on them. Adding more folks to this area would just increase the vehicular traffic. And it was interesting that the satellite imagery that they showed for the outline of the parking lot area was packed with vehicles already. So that was just a anecdotal observation. And that's all I have. And thank you for hearing my comments.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Karen Patrick. Karen,
Hi. Yeah, can you hear me? Sorry.
yes, we can.
All right, this is very high tech for me. Thank you. My name is Karen Patrick. I'm the Island Creek Association president, and I represent a community of over 1,000 single-family homes, townhomes, and condos. I do appreciate Ms. Strobel meeting with us. We met with her in the fall time last year, and we met with her last month to talk about some concerns. But I don't want to beat a dead horse about the traffic around the area, but one of the main points that I feel that aren't really being addressed are the traffic it's going to bring to the community, but also with the other approved communities that are already in various stages of development, whatever that means. I believe there's 300 and some residential for Liberty View, which is a couple miles down the road. You have 300 and some residential units approved already at the former Toys R Us location. And then you also have, I believe, 600 or so residential units approved for the center, which is all about a 7-mile radius from us and Island Creek. And that's 1,270 approved residential units, which is increasing cars on the roads, kids in the schools. With the addition of these 300 units, you're talking over 1,500 homes with adults, parents, kids, traffic, cars, schools in a 7-mile radius. And I don't think that you can deny that even though businesses may benefit from more people, more cars on the roads with already very strained roadways. Island Creek doesn't even have a turn lane into its community. It's just too much. And that's just one of the main reasons, in addition to what Lansdowne has already spoke up, that Island Creek is against this development. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next speaker is Frederick Latrache.
Can you put it on?
Sorry.
I'm
Fred,
Fred
can you hear us?
Latrache. Give me 1 second here to turn off my.
I think we lost Frederick, so if we
All right, let's
and
move on to the next one. We can come back to him if he wishes.
Sure. Karen Patrick, you're next. Karen, can you hear us?
Sorry,
Karen
Fred
just
Latrache,
spoke.
Fred Latrache is with me. Sorry, that's why we were having the issues. This is Fred Latrache, not Karen Patrick.
Hi, my name is Fred Latrache. I'm the Vice President of the Island Creek Community Association, and I visited the Fort Belvoir District Director of Public Works and spoke with Chris Langrath, who was the acting Director of Public Works at the time that Lynn spoke with him, but also spoke with Brad Britton, who's the current Director of Public Works, with 2 other members, one representing Lansdowne, one representing Hawthorne, at the end of August. I think it's interesting that the words Fort Belvoir does not object to the current plan were used when in fact Fort Belvoir cannot object. What they can do is make recommendations, and they didn't make 1, they made 3 recommendations, only 1 of which was addressed. The one that that resulted in moving the structures down so that they didn't overlook directly the data center on the other side of the building was addressed. However, there were 2 other recommendations that were made by the installation. There was a strong preference to retain the structure as an office building as opposed to a residential building with individual leases because of the increases of potential security. The third thing was that that they recommended that a completed and updated independent traffic study be conducted prior to submitting the application in the same manner that it's required of the base or any installation to submit to the county before they can move forward with their plans to to conduct the construction. Neither of those two additional recommendations were addressed. And to say that the plans address all of the recommendations of the base would be a third correct. The second point that was brought up after multiple efforts to try and get a legible overview of the plans that was up to date, as opposed to the one that I took with me because it was not current to this meeting. We discovered after blowing it up that the traffic study that was actually used for this proposal was from 2012. And since 2012, the Wegmans Shopping Center was put in. Jeff Todd Way was put in. And since those two large infrastructure projects were done, 8 new homes were put in our strong court, 14 townhomes to Devonshire, 7 homes to Winstead Manor, 10 homes to Abbott Road, 28 homes to Long Branch, 249 new residences to the crest of Alexandria, 8 new homes to Chenoweth, 21 new homes to Lyndham's Circle, and that doesn't include the 212 townhomes that are being discussed at Topgolf, the 300 units at Liberty, the 800 units at the Kingstown Center, or the 324 units at the old Toys R Us. All of that happened and is based on a traffic study of 2012, 8 years ago. And we're still building proposing additional construction to move forward based on this outdated traffic study with traffic counts that caused that required that traffic light in question to be upgraded from a condition of F to a condition of D in order for the Wegmans Shopping Center to go in. And nobody's gone back to look at that traffic light to see if all of this construction has pushed it back into a condition of F. So based on all those different safety concerns, which have unfortunately resulted in a one fatality and others on Telegraph Road, further down from this, we are really opposed to the idea that that we're going to go ahead and move forward with this project, and would recommend that the SSPA vote no and take this project out of consideration.
Thank you.
If I might just address a couple of things, if I may.
I'm not the chair.
No, I was asking Mr. Joseph.
Yeah, maybe I was muted. I'm sorry. I did say go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And I don't know what it means to say that Fort Belvoir cannot object. I will just say that when I met with Mr. Landgraf last summer, it was probably around August, maybe it was July. Then I spoke with him again this spring, and he said he had no objection. I think he could have made a concern known, but he did say that with the garage being located to the previous position, they would not have objection to the residential. And we absolutely will do an updated traffic study before we move forward with plans. That's what would be done, starting with the comprehensive plan amendment and then with the proper condition amendment. And I would like to ask Mr. Kennedy to address the issue of the traffic study in 2012 and how he assembled his information.
Yeah, this is Doug Kennedy with Pannoni, and we did the analysis in 2012. We did forecast Jeff Todd Way. We did forecast the build out of the Hilltop for Wegmans and the office building. And so we did allow for the growth in the area. We've not taken new counts out there, but we felt for the plan amendment that we could look at the past forecasts, which were done in 2012 for a future condition to assess the impacts at the intersections adjacent to this site.
I think that, Doug, that would be the appropriate level of study at this stage of the process.
Yeah, typically we would go through a much more detailed analysis as part of the plan amendment or as part of the zoning application, specifically taking new counts. We've looked at the VDOT data, and we did look at some of the trends between 2012, 2015, and traffic counts as currently published through 2019 by VDOT. And we did feel that our forecasts were consistent with some of the regional growth trends to allow for future residential development on both Beulah Street and Telegraph Road.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much. All right, we're at about a half hour since public comment started. Do we have many more people lined up to speak?
I see 4 currently that are lined up to speak still.
All right, let's limit it to those 4 then. All right, so let's go ahead with the first.
Okay. The next is Lori Flanagan. Lori, can you hear us? Lori?
Yes, thank you. I can hear you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. As one of over 1,400 residents of the area that signed a petition opposed to this project, I have to say it's not okay to say, don't put the cart before the horse and we'll figure out some of the impacts later, especially where our schools are concerned. Our area schools are already at capacity. I have a child I'm a resident of Lansdowne, and I have a child at Edison High School. They have over 32 kids in a class. In some cases, in some classes, they bank on a child being absent to make sure everyone has a desk. The other area schools are at capacity as well. To say we'll figure out the impacts on our schools later as we go through the process is not okay. There are real issues that need to be addressed now, and no project should be approved until those real issues are addressed, especially when you consider Lansdowne has 618 families living in it, and the proposed residential project would be a 50% increase in that number of residents just from what's here with Lansdowne when we already have area schools at capacity. I beg you to please make sure there are true impacts, not we'll figure out later as we go through the process before moving forward with anything that could very much change the quality of life for people in the area. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And next is Shane McClung. Shane, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. One, I just want to thank the Land Use Committee for everything that they do in spending all of their time as volunteers to look over everything like this. That is much appreciated. We know how rare it is for volunteers to help. Secondly, I'm going to keep my comments very short because most everything's already been said. But to piggyback on what Lori said there, the questions I would ask is, how would it be that public transportation is the one that they figure is going to be mostly for this complex, when they're also saying at the same time that they're gearing this towards Fort Belvoir? Public transportation does not go into Fort Belvoir. Secondly, how would you fix the pedestrian issues? There's already not enough space there as it is. Extra development means you take away all the land ability to develop, which means that there's nowhere to put anything to fix the pedestrian issues. And lastly, how would you keep the overflow of all the residents there when we have seen even in our own communities, it goes beyond the 1 car per resident. How do you keep that overflow from going into the neighboring communities, and which means that we have to do much more in our area to keep people even from parking in spots that we're already limited in for our own neighborhoods? The overflow would fall right into Lansdowne, which is I'm a resident of. Thank you very much. I want to keep it very short. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Next is Mark O'Donnell. Mark, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm a resident of Lansdowne. Heard Fort Belvoir mentioned a couple times, and you agree. I know that Lynn was directed to speak with the Director of Public Works, but the Director of Public Works, who is in charge of the roads and the infrastructure at Belvoir, unless it's a major security issue or something like that, Belvoir is not going to come out and object to it. But and then the issue of possibly housing for Belvoir workers. As most people know, Belvoir is not a basic training camp. Most of the officers there are field grade officers, mid-level NCOs. I would say 90% plus of them are married and have families. So saying there may be some geographic bachelors and bachelorettes, but certainly the majority of the people on Belvoir are married with families. So I don't see that being a big plus up for certainly military and probably individuals that work at Belvoir. And my real point is a rhetorical question. Maybe Lynn could answer this if possible, but has a study or an analysis been done of Belvoir Square, the facility, the new hotel or apartments that are down there right off of Route 1 out the gate there on Fort Belvoir? I'd like to see, is that apartments, are those fully occupied? What's the residency rate there? And has there been any issues down there with the traffic as well? Then I ask if people have not driven by that, to go ahead, take a mental picture of that, and then drive up to Beulah and Telegraph and put that mental picture on that street corner. And it is not a pretty sight in my opinion. So again, mainly just on the Belvoir side, and I'd like to see if any study or analysis has been done of Belvoir Square. And I'll end my comments there.
I'll just reply briefly that we have not done an analysis of Belvoir Square. Happy to do that, but we have not looked at their occupancy rates or specifically what their traffic patterns are. I don't think that we have. Doug can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
No, we have not.
Okay, so the next speaker should be the last one, if I remember correctly.
I miscounted. I apologize. There's actually 5, not 4. So I think there's one additional.
Okay.
The next is Roxanne White.
I'm sorry?
Oh, next is Roxanne White. Roxanne, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes, we can.
Hello? Can you hear me? I'm so sorry.
Yes, go ahead, Roxanne.
Thank you so much. You say that the developer thinks that they will put more studios and 1-bedrooms and less 2-bedrooms in. So maybe there won't be as many children crowding into my children's school. And this does not make me feel better. And this does not make any of the parents with special needs kids feel any better. My child is autistic and also has T1D, so less adults than my son is actually dangerous to his health. Your word that no children will move in seems kind of disingenuous. Putting 300 units across the street from us, you can't guarantee that more children will be moving in. And my husband and I spent years fighting to get the needs of my son met. And honestly, I'm tired. I would much rather be watching a movie with my family downstairs than begging you to not put this building in. Island Creek cannot take any more children. We could take more time away from my son and the other children in our community with special needs. And frankly, this building scares me. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, and then the next and last speaker is Mel Hansen. So, Mel, can you hear us?
Go ahead, Mel.
Mel, I've just unmuted you. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you loud and clear.
Great.
Go ahead, Mel.
Thank you. I also want to thank the task force. They're not only doing this, but they do many other projects in the community. So thank you all for your time and commitment to this. I want to come from a little bit different angle. While we've talked traffic, and I think almost to nauseam, I want to bring up the aesthetics of how this will affect our community. I'm concerned about parking, and when I say parking, I don't mean that everybody gets a place. What I'm concerned about is you have the one person who rents the studio apartment, and then mom comes to visit them. So what they're going to need to do is find a place to park their car so that mom can park in their parking place. So what I predict is going to happen is they're all going to funnel down because you cannot park on Telegraph and you cannot park on Beulah. And we know all the businesses will lock down their parking spaces so that they're all going to come channeling down View Lane. And that's going to change the aesthetics of our neighborhood in such a tremendous way. I predict there will be more crime in our neighborhood because when you bring traffic and cars sit around, it's just part of that project. So I really want to challenge you on that. And I also want to bring up, I want to thank Fred Latrache. He set up an appointment for us to go down, 3 members from the 3 communities, Hawthorne, Lansdowne, and Island Creek, went down to meet the Public Works Director. And the day we went was actually August 28th. And it was actually Chris's last day. So the new director is actually, I'm losing his name now. Britton is his last name. Brett Britton, I believe, is his name. So what I'm even telling you is the information you have. And while he said they are really, he said, we have no authority to stop it, is the way he put it to us. I wrote that down because that was imperative to me. He said they are very concerned about an office building versus putting a residential building with individual leases, because that greatly increases potential security threats to Fort Belvoir. But they, as she said, or as he said, they cannot stop it. They can just recommend. So I would tell you, we have a lot of military here too. Put our military in jeopardy over a housing development that does not fit into this neighborhood. You're putting a big 5-story building into a residential neighborhood with single family and townhouses. Just doesn't make sense to me. And I'm a realtor. I would love to turn around and sell those units, but they don't fit in this neighborhood. And if you turn it into an apartment, I want to know, where the dumpsters going to go? Where is green space? We haven't even talked about green space. And I know Lynn's going to say, well, we'll get to that when we go further down the road. But I know how this works. It keeps going, and then it won't stop anymore. And then it goes through, whether it's a good idea or not. I really want to appeal to the developer. Please go find somewhere else to do this. There is plenty of land on Richmond Highway that would support this in a great way. Richmond Highway is going to be set up to have metro. They're going to have bus systems. They're going to have all sorts of things in place. We're not there. We're not that neighborhood. Please go find somewhere else. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mel. All right. Well, that wraps up the public comment portion of our program. We now move on to discussion by the task force itself. So I am ready to recognize any member of the task force who wishes to speak.
Yeah, this is Justin.
Oh, Jeff, right. That's right. You wanted to go first. I'm so sorry. Go right ahead, Jeff.
Thank you, appreciate it. Hey, I just
You're in
want
the
to
dark.
talk for a while. My wife Sona and I, we've been actually talking to Wegmans for quite some time about this potential nomination.
It's difficult to hear you. Is that, can you
hear me any better right now?
Actually, yes. Thank you.
Anyway, my wife Sona and I, we've been talking to Wegmans about this for quite some time, a few months now. But not only have we been talking to Paul Mayer, who's the store manager over there at Hilltop, but we've been talking to Blaine Forkel, who's the senior vice president of properties for Wegmans Mid-Atlantic. Now, they own the building, but clearly they don't own the land. Right? They have told us unequivocally they have a problem with it. They just can't talk about it because they don't own the land. But their concern is that once people have a problem getting in and out of the development, certain days, or if it happens more than once, many days, right? Then those people tend to shop somewhere else. So this comes from high up in Wegmans, where they're concerned about it as well, because they feel their business might be hurt if this moves forward eventually. That's number one of us. Number two, Mel just talked about it, so did Fred Latrache as well. I just want to reemphasize the fact that the public works folks at Fort Belvoir, they have specifically said condos and apartments, whatever it might be, are very transient. It's a security risk. There's no military base in America that really wants to have this near you. So I think we should consider that as a serious part of this deliberation. Now I want to reach back more to the committee itself. When Carl Sell and the late Bob McLaren started the Lee District Land Use Committee over 40 years ago, The point of the Lead District Land Use Committee, and in essence this task force now, is to have community representation to things that are around our areas that we may or may not want. And so what we're seeing right now, I hope you can see, I hope you agree with this, is that we have the Beulah Corridor, we have Raceway Farms, even in Mount Vernon's district. And remember, as Lead District Land Use people, or task force, sorry, excuse me, we're also participating at the Huntington Metro as far as what's happening there in Mount Vernon district. So what we say there is important, but people from Raceway Farms and previously Mount Airside should be listened to as well. My general calculation is that in a 2-mile radius, you get 2,500 homeowners that are standing against this. And if we're looking at what the Lead District Land Use Committee first came all about to be for, it makes sense. I mean, we're standing up against this. We hope you'll join us on it. You know, it's just really, really important that this time, this particular instance, that it's the communities are spoken here, and we'd rather not have it. So hope that y'all agree with us on that. I hope when everybody finishes their part of the discussion here, that you allow me to put a motion forward to actually take this off the book. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Who else from the task force would like to speak?
Was that a motion?
Well, we're not ready. We're not ready for motions yet. Who else would like to speak?
This is Leah.
Go ahead, Leah.
As a member of this task force and a land use representative for quite a long time, I've seen processes go through, the Fort Belvoir studies and things like that. And I think in the end, once things went forward to be tabled and looked at in more detail, people became more aware of some more facts about traffic, about the impacts of what's proffered versus impacts of what's changed or proposed to be changed. So I think that this process that we go to that allows us to table this particular package on Hilltop is a good one. And, we need to consider Fort Belvoir, but we also had objections from Fort Belvoir on having the office building. And there were other things that came about in those discussions too that need further development. So I believe that this should be studied more because you may end up having a better mix of uses than if you just had an office building that was vacant, which I've seen all over the place at this point. With COVID changes, we're going to need to look at a different way of proposing business buildings. And we definitely don't want another vacant building here. So I think it's worth going forward to see what kinds of options we have with this particular parcel. Thanks.
Thank you, Leah.
This is
Who else
Carol.
would like to speak? Carol, go right ahead.
Yes, I have a couple of things. One of the things that we always hear when a developer wants to convert office to residential is less traffic. The thing that they seem to push to the background is that the traffic is now same directional. So we're competing for road time and metro seats with this new community, plus the traffic is with us 7 days a week, not just 5. I think Lynn's comparison of this putting a residential here to Mosaic is somewhat disingenuous. The only way it would be comparable to the Mosaic is if there were only one residential building at the Mosaic and it was on the corner of Lee Highway and Gallows Road. I understand that this is the beginning of a process, but I think it's inappropriate to put a residential building as an anchor for a shopping center. And I think the best time to stop it from going forward is now. not after it gets put into a work project, where in all likelihood it will come back to us not as a comprehensive plan change, but as a combo comprehensive zoning and final development plan. So I think the time to stop it is now.
Thank you, Carol.
This is Tom Sachs.
Tom, go ahead.
Mosaic may have not been a good example, but the Wegmans at Woodbridge at Stonebridge at Potomac, they built a whole apartment complex after the shopping center was completed. And that shopping center is just a little bit bigger than our shopping center. So there is a long history of building housing near grocery stores. And I could name a dozen other places where they put in grocery stores with housing to do some economies of scale. I'm very concerned about the parking, and I really appreciate all the input from all the residents. But I'm with Leah. They're going to build something. The best way for us to have a handle on it is to get the county to go in and do a much more complete study to determine whether making amendments to the comprehensive plan are logical. We don't have to let it go any further than zoning. We can kill it there if none of these issues have been addressed. But I've seen through the zoning process significant changes in proposed development, decrease in numbers, changes in styles, additional parking. So if we let it get up to the point that we have zoning, then there'll be new traffic studies and there'll be more studies about additional students per school. What people are forgetting is they'll also be making a big contribution for schools. So it's not just a negative. My recommendation would be, let's let it go through the comprehensive plan process, let them look at it and study it. And at that point, we'll still have the opportunity to put the brakes on it. For example, my concern on parking is, my recollection is the entire parking structure was available after hours on championship games if Green Turtle overwhelmed the parking lots. That's not going to be the case now. So there are a lot of issues that need to be more fully studied, but let's do it as part of the process of zoning. Thanks.
Okay, can I speak now for Ed?
Yeah, who's this?
Jane
Jane?
Kelly?
Yes, go ahead, Jane.
I called two of the apartments that are, I think it was Mark O'Donnell that mentioned the housing near the Telegate. One of them has 40 vacancies and the other one has 10 vacancies, and that's a small building. So there's already tons of vacancies over at the Telegate for people that want to live near Fort Belvoir, that work at Fort Belvoir. The other issue is, I want to reiterate what Fred Latrache said. I was also at the meeting with Fort Belvoir Public Works. This traffic study was done 8.5 years ago, and Jeff Todd Way did not exist. But opening up Jeff Todd Way has opened up Mount Vernon and the Richmond Highway corridor to Telegraph and Beulah. There's been a huge impact on our neighborhood with that opening of Jeff Todd Way. And the crest of Alexandria did not exist back then. And all the other properties that have added 7 here, 10 there, 14 here. And so I just wanted to reiterate that. One last comment is the intersection coming across from CVS, the Lansdowne Shopping Center. There is only 2 lanes there. The right-hand lane, you can take a right, so you can either go left or right onto Telegraph. The other lane, you can only go left or straight. It's already a nightmare. So I just wanted to bring those points up. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Jane.
And this is Holly Doherty.
Go ahead, Holly.
I think this is a really difficult decision for the land use committee. I think this is probably one of the most difficult situations I personally have seen. I generally am very adverse to rezoning office to residential because I think we need all different uses in our community. But I am given pause on this project for 2 reasons. And First, I'll put on my Chamber of Commerce hat and say that many of the businesses in that shop, and it's a little disappointing to me to hear the residents nearby tell us how many people there are, but I don't think they're using the businesses in that shopping center from the reports that I hear from the businesses there. Now, I go and shop at Wegmans, and I, of course, don't want more customers there myself because I like shopping there, but a lot of the smaller businesses aren't using. There's been a lot of turnover already in the short time. So something needs to be done there to generate businesses so that that shopping center can stay vibrant. And the second reason that I have pause about this is that Fort Belvoir is the largest employer in Fairfax County. And you know, that's not going to change. It's the Pentagon's office park, and they've got places they can grow, and they probably will over the years. And if we have housing centers that are adjacent to the installation, so people don't have to be on the roads to drive there, that can be an advantage for the whole area. And so those two reasons make me think that we really ought to look at this a little bit more, look at the size of the proposal, you know, the proposed density, different things, let it continue through the process and see what can happen. You know, maybe even a mixed-use office and residential could come out of that, who knows? Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Anyone else from the task force wishing to speak?
Yeah, this is Jeff again. Can you say one more thing real quick?
Go ahead.
Yeah, just the fact, the comment there about Wegmans at Potomac Town Center. There's I-95 there. There is 3 multi-lane secondary roads that were planned well in advance. So that development can take that traffic because it was planned in advance. Here we're trying to wedge something in. So that's
Thanks, Jeff. Anybody else from the task force? I'm not hearing anybody speak up.
This is Jonna. Can I just ask a quick question? Isn't telegraph scheduled to be widened the rest of the way down there? I mean, I've been a part of this since 1990, and they've been trying to get Telegraph Road, and they've been doing it in sections. But I think from Jeff Todd way up, will get widened with this project probably. And that will have an impact on positively, I think, on the traffic, but also on this becoming a destination, either to live or to shop. But I think it is scheduled. It's just when the right time is with funding and all. But I think it is scheduled at least to go marry it up with the up to Van Dorn to widen it. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong.
Jonah, I can check that quickly, but just bear with me for 1 second because others can speak while I look it up if you'd like.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak?
I think the Chris Landgraf from the Public Works at Fort Belvoir, he told us that they can't expand that. I think all the residents down there, none of them want their property shortened.
Okay.
This is Tom. I think it was going to be widened as far as Hayfield High School.
I wondered if Doug Kennedy was still with us. He might have some input on that.
Yeah, I was trying to check also with Graham. They have studied it. It's on the transportation plan to be updated, but they don't have the full funding up. You know, they broke it up between where the site is, Jeff Todd to Hayfield, but there is not. It's not in the 6-year plan for funding currently.
Okay, thank you. Well, if there's no one else from the task force who wishes to make a comment, then we can,
I'd like to make a proposal.
who is that?
Jeffrey,
This is Leah.
I move a motion forward.
Well, hold on, Jeff. What did you want to say, Leah?
I'd like to make a motion.
What motion do you wish to make?
Yeah, I thought
That we move.
You both came in at like the same time.
I'd like to move a motion that we move this.
I can't hear you, Jeff. I'm sorry.
I'd like to move a motion that nomination from the work.
Well,
This is Tom. Leah came in first.
I sort of thought she was like a half second earlier, but
Yes.
you know, I do want to remind everyone. Tom, could you mute yourself? I'm hearing myself coming back. I did want
I'm
to.
having a hard time hearing everybody. I don't know what's going on. Everybody needs to shut their silence themselves if they're not speaking, because it's getting a lot of feedback on this line.
I did want to remind everyone that any motion can be to include on the work program, to exclude, or to include with specific recommendations. So for example, if we want this to be studied with particular attention to traffic, to Fort Belvoir, to parking, or to any other issues, that could be part of the motion. Since I do think Leah was in just before Jeff, I will go to Leah at this point.
And Ed, I did say at the end of my first talk that when everybody gets done, I'd like to make a motion. I did say that.
Well, that's you did make a reference to making a motion. That is true.
And you hadn't opened it for motions yet when Leah spoke up.
I thought I had. Tom?
You had.
You had that. I heard you open it up.
All right. Leah, what is your motion?
I would like to propose a motion to move this forward on the work plan with the condition that traffic improvements be considered as a primary focus of the moving it forward.
Leah, this is Tom. I'd like to make a friendly amendment.
That's fine with me.
I'd like them to also look at the impact on schools and whether there's adequate parking planned with the submission.
I have no problem with that friendly amendment.
I'll second your amendment, your motion.
So the motion is to place on the work program with traffic considerations, as well as what were the others?
Impact in schools.
And
ensure there's adequate parking in the submission.
And security for Fort Belvoir.
Is that a friendly amendment?
Well, is that, I mean, Leah, is that
Who just
something you
spoke up
would,
for the security?
Leah, is that
Yeah,
something you would wish to add?
I can add that. I just wanted to make sure she was making a friendly amendment.
Yes. And how about aesthetics and green space? For a friendly amendment?
So we have move forward to the work plan with traffic impacts, impacts on school, adequate parking, security issues for Fort Belvoir. I'm writing this down. And green space.
Those are acceptable to me.
I have
Okay,
no problem
so-
with that.
Ed, I have a
So-
question.
I'm sorry? Go ahead, Jeff. Go ahead, Jeff.
So if we vote no, does that mean we move it off the work program? Because that's what I like to add in here. We vote no, it moves off the.
No, it goes forward with either a yes or a no.
Well, wait. So the motion, as it's currently contemplated, work program with the various recommendations to focus on traffic impacts, schools, adequate parking, security at Fort Belvoir, and green space. So if that, and so Jeff, your question is if that motion fails, where does that leave us?
If we vote yes, that moves it off the work program.
I'm sorry, Jeff, I'm hearing you. Any chance you have a microphone, like a headset or something?
So what I'm saying is that if it's no, then we move it off the work program.
I believe you'd have to do another motion.
Yeah, if this motion should fail, then we have nothing approved and the floor would be open to another motion.
So then at that point, we could move to table until the appropriate traffic study has been conducted?
Well, I think you
John,
could
again, and
move-
I hear Jeff asking that if somebody makes a substitute motion to not approve this, then it would kill it. And that's not this thing goes forward with an approval or without an approval, or with an approval with the substance. I think Jeff was asking if we can move, somebody moves to, no, we don't want this to go forward, then it stops. And that's not the case.
No.
I'm not
Well,
understanding.
that's what most of us want. We want to table it until there's a further traffic study has been conducted.
But that's not an option.
That's not an option.
Yeah, that is not an option. We need to make, whatever recommendation we're making needs to be made tonight. And that the recommendation could be that this not ultimate, that this doesn't I guess we could recommend something along the lines of this, that this not ultimately get approved without a new traffic study. I suppose that could be part of our recommendation.
Ed, I think the confusion is with the process in general. We are step 2 of a 4-step screening process. The county staff made a recommendation to accept this into the work program. We are now going to make a recommendation to either accept it or reject it into the work program or exclude it from the work program. After which it will go to the Planning Commission and they will review the application and make a decision, which will then go to the Board of Supervisors. It doesn't
Actually,
get.
there's a whole other round where it comes back to us, but that's a whole other story.
My understanding was that was after the Board of Supervisors approved it. If they approved it, then it would come back.
On the work, right, okay. On
Work
the work
project.
Right.
But and you did explain it. We don't have the option to kill it and then it doesn't go forward. We can say we don't want it included in the workforce, in the work study, but it still goes to the next level with or without.
Oh, if what you're saying, John, is that no matter what we say, the Planning Commission still gets to make their decision about what they recommend to the Board of Supervisors, that is accurate.
And I think that's the confusion with Jeff and everybody when it stopped.
Or we can recommend no, but either way, we don't end the process.
And that's what I'm seeing in some of the.
It's just a recommendation to the board, to
Yes.
the Planning Commission at the next level. just
But I'm seeing the
as,
public writing some comments, and Jeff is writing, saying that they want to kill it here, and we don't have that as an option. We can vote for it, against it, it goes on.
right, and that is an accurate point. If we vote not to include this, that doesn't kill it, it just puts our weight on the side of it not going forward. And it's ultimately to higher levels to decide whether it indeed goes forward or not.
Right, the Board of Supervisors will make that decision.
Correct.
Want to call the motion?
All right, so I believe we had a second, is that correct?
Yes, Tom seconded it.
Tom seconded it? Okay, so to review, the motion is to place this nomination on the work program with the recommendation that there be a primary focus on impacts, school impacts, adequate parking, security at Fort Belvoir, and green space. Did I adequately state the motion?
Yes, you
I
did.
accurately state the motion?
Yes, you
Okay.
did.
All right. So that is the motion. We will now go to a roll call vote. Vote yes if you approve the motion. Vote no if you disapprove the motion. So Robert Livingstone,
No.
Carol Allen,
Carol Elm votes no.
Rand Pixa,
No.
Pamela Pineros,
No.
Leah Lambeski,
Yes.
I believe you said yes. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
All right. Larry Dempsey,
No.
Jane Kelly,
No. No.
understood, thank you. Jeff Safel,
No.
Tom Rickard,
No.
Cindy Potter,
No.
Jim Drinkard,
Yes.
Rosemary Clay,
No.
Holly Doherty,
Yes.
Don Tennant,
Don Tennant votes yes.
Carl Sell,
No.
Mariah Jones,
Yes.
Marta Morrissey.
No.
I'm sorry, repeat that?
No.
That's a no. Okay. Steve Levinson,
Yes.
thank you. Tom Sachs,
Yes.
Jim McCracken,
No.
Richard Dresner, Richard Dresner,
No. No.
that's a no from Richard Dresner.
Correct.
John Gagnon,
Yes, John votes yes.
okay, so we have 8 yeses and 14 noes. The motion does not carry. Okay, do we have anyone else wishing to make a follow-up motion?
So Ed, can I make a motion that we remove it from the work program, please?
Yes, you may.
What I'd like to do.
I'll second that motion.
So motion to remove from work, to exclude from work program.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
All right, who was that
Second motion.
seconding it? Who
Jane Kelly.
seconded?
Jane Kelly.
Got it. Thank you, Jane. Okay, so just give me a moment to get organized here. Okay. We will now move to a roll call on the new motion, which is to exclude this nomination from the work program. Robert Livingstone,
Yes.
Carol Allen,
Yes.
Rand Pixa,
Yes.
Pamela Pineros,
Yes.
Leah Lambert-Skidmore,
No.
Larry Dempsey,
Yes.
Jane Kelly,
Yes.
Jeff Seffel,
Yes.
Tom Rickert,
Yes.
Cindy Potter,
Yes.
Jim Drinkard,
No.
Rosemary Clay,
Yes.
Holly Doherty,
No, Holly votes no.
thank you, Don Kennett,
Don Tenet votes no.
Al Sell,
Yes.
Mariah Jones,
No.
Marta Morrissey,
Yes.
Steve Levinson,
No.
Tom Sachs,
No.
Jim McCracken,
Yes.
Richard Dresner,
Yes.
thank you, John and Gagnon,
Wait a minute, we're voting, well, I've lost track here. We're voting to not include it, correct? This
the
vote is
motion is to not include in the work program.
no. John votes no.
Okay, so we have 14 yeses and 8 nos. The motion passes. So the motion to exclude from the work program passes. All right, well, thank you, everybody. That concludes this phase of the task force's work. I appreciate everybody's close attention and attending all these meetings, dealing with the technology. And that, I suppose, is it. Anybody else has anybody else they want to say? We stand adjourned.
I want to thank everybody for your time. I know this was difficult. I just want to say thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. Take care.
And I want to say
Thank you all to all the task force members from staff. I know I mentioned this at the beginning, but wanted to just say thank you all for all your time that you've put into this. I know it's been hours taking up evening time with your families. So just wanted to say thank you very much for all the time that you've put into this. And I thought it's been a very, very good discussion that we've had with this task force in particular. So thank you very much.
Thank you to staff also.
Absolutely.
Ed, thank you for leading us through this process.
Well,
And
Yeah, I
Leah,
wanna
thank you for taking the minutes. That's not easy either.
You should
Ed
see
does-
my typing going crazy.
I think Ed does an exceptional job keeping the discussion on point and letting everyone have their say. And Ed, I just think you do a great job. Thank you.
I appreciate the kind words. Thank you very much. And unless anybody has anything contrary or whatever to say, I think we're done.
Thank
So
you.
thanks again to everybody. And
Ed, there was a
regular land use next week.
next week. Thank you. Okay. Bye. Stay safe, everybody. Take care.